Hello there! Welcome to the Throne of Thunder Looking for Raid guide. My name is Tuskeh, and in this video we will discuss Wing 4 of the Throne of Thunder, the Pinnacle of Storms. We'll cover everything from trash to the bosses and how to handle them. Role-specific information will also be included. This is a 3-boss wing, and every boss has a chance to drop a Sigil of Power, a Sigil of Wisdom, a Secrets of the Empire, and a Titan Runestone for your legendary questline. Lei Shen, the final boss of the wing, will always drop a Secrets of the Empire or a Titan Runestone once per week. Now, just to clarify, this video is not a substitute for a detailed boss-specific guide. This is more of an overview, designed to get you up to speed with the bosses you'll be facing so that you're ready to complete the wing and keep up with the others in your pug. As always, the best thing to be in an LFR is patient. People are going to ignore mechanics, be ignorant, stand in stuff, and mess about, so it's important that you know what you're doing to help things run as smoothly as they can. Now, let's get started. The trash up to the first boss isn't particularly difficult, although that's not really an excuse to pull everything in one gigantic pull that never ends, which is what happened to me. Tanks, take your time to learn the group's strengths and weaknesses before mass pulling. The skittering spiderlings can just be AoE down, the muck bats do a little bit of ranged damage, the putrid waste puts a minor dot on anyone that hits them, and the rotting scavenger does a cleave called frenzied consumption, puts a dot on their tank, and does a bit of raid damage. As you can see, it is possible to mass pull everything, as our tank did here, but I would not recommend it. There's every chance that your healers may be slow or just asleep, and if the mass pulling tank dies, then everyone dies. Make your way through the sewers and out to the grate, following the same path we used here. Once most of the trash is dead, open the grate by right-clicking on it and proceed into the courtyard. There are 2 mini-bosses in this courtyard, each coming with a large group of untrained Quillen, which put a dot on the tank and leap at random raid members for damage. The 2 mini-bosses are called Wei Sheng and Manchu. Wei Sheng will buff everything around him, including the Quillen, and Manchu does large shockwaves using Wild Smash, each of which does raid damage. He'll also use Triumphant Rush, jumping forwards and knocking people he hits backwards. These can just be AoE down with the Quillen. It's best to stack up while doing this to just heal through everything. If your group struggles here, try separating the mini-boss from his group of Quillen. Just remember that you don't have to pull both of these mini-bosses at once like our tank did, and you don't have to pull the mini-bosses, the entire trash, and the boss at the same time like this tank did. Once the mini-bosses are dead, it's time for Iron Quan. This fight revolves around various mounts that the boss uses. He has 3 of them, each attuned to a different element. He'll start with fire, then go to air, then go to frost. Then you'll fight the Iron Quan directly. To make him get off of his mount, you have to kill it, effectively making this 4-phase fight into 4 separate fights. We'll start with the tanks. Throughout the fight, Iron Quan will use an ability called Impale on you, which will deal damage and leave a dot. This will stack. As per usual, you'll want to tank swap. This ability can be swapped at 2 stacks. Now, during every phase, Iron Quan will interact with his spear in some way. He'll throw it at a ranged raid member, then his mount will interact with it, creating lines of negative elemental fire, lightning, or ice. You'll always want to avoid these, they cannot be jumped over. In the last phase, when Iron Quan is out of mounts, he'll just do raid damage after throwing his spear instead. The first mount Iron Quan uses is Roshak, the Molten Flare. This guy will do fairly heavy raid damage using Molten Inferno, and will use Unleashed Flame on groups of stacked players. Spreading out is generally a good idea here, but it can be noted that stacking up and taking damage from Unleashed Flame will make Roshak cast Molten Infernos much less. So either way, the healers will be doing raid healing here. As in every mount phase, Iron Quan will throw his spear out, and then Roshak will make it explode with fire, creating lines of fire on the ground that leave a dot. They last for quite a while, enough so that 2 spears will overlap lines of fire. Find a safe space to stand in and don't get caught standing in the bad. Once Roshak is dead, the Iron Quan will call Quetzal, the Stormcaller, in. This guy has 2 main abilities. The first is Arcing Lightning, which will target a random ranged member and create a lightning storm at them. This will stun them for 30 seconds, make them absorb healing, and do constant AoE damage around them. To stop this effect, someone has to run over to the stunned player and right-click on them. Just a note, any time that the lightning storm or the arcing lightning from the storm deals AoE damage to someone else, they also get a debuff. This is called arcing lightning. It doesn't stun them, but it can spread throughout the entire raid very fast, dealing damage that isn't really high enough for it to be an issue, so don't worry too much about it. Quetzal's other ability is Wind Storm. This basically acts as an intermission phase. He'll pull everyone to the center of the room, unless you're lightning stormed like me, so please free people that are lightning stormed. And then he'll create multiple tornadoes that whirl in large circles. The windstorm will deal raid damage as long as players are stuck in it, so you'll want to run directly forwards towards where you entered the room. Once you do, you'll stop taking raid damage. If you get caught by a tornado, it will pick you up for a few seconds and deal very high raid damage. This part of the fight is all about awareness. You want to move as fast as you can, but at some points you'll want to pause to let a tornado go past you before continuing. Keep your eyes open. After about 20 seconds, Quetzal will fly down to the edge of the storm and it will end. However, a few of the tornadoes will remain in the fight afterwards, still dealing damage and stunning anyone they come into contact with. They'll move around randomly at this point, so keep your eyes out. To prevent the raid from having to deal with these tornadoes, you'll want to complete the fight in the rectangular alcove you escaped the windstorm in. Just beware that occasionally a tornado may wander into this area, so keep an eye out. As before, Iron Quan will still throw out his spear, and Quetzal will make lightning lines that will stun you after a few stacks, so don't stand in the bad. After Quetzal dies, Iron Quan will call his final mount, Damren the Frozen Sage. He will, at all times, reflect 2% of the damage done to him. This is completely ignorable unless you decide to hit him for 50 million, which you won't be doing. His main ability is Dead Zone. Damren has 4 sides, front, left, right, and back. Dead Zone will create a shield at 2 of these sides, and any attacks that hit him through that side will be completely negated. For this reason, DPSs are going to want to be on their toes and move around him to hit him from a part that isn't shielded. This dead zone will only last for a few seconds, so ranged, if you're far away from him, don't bother moving through all the crap, just wait for the next dead zone to come in. Finally, Damren will use Freeze, targeting a raid member and giving them a debuff. After a couple seconds, he'll shatter the debuff and deal a chunk of raid damage. As before, Iron Quan will throw out his spear, and Damren will create frost lines around it. These will slow your movement, casting and attack speeds, and will stack, so don't stand in them. Once Damren dies, Iron Quan is left all by his lonesome, and the fight becomes a DPS race. Bloodlust at this point. Iron Quan will gain a damage bonus periodically called Rising Anger, which stacks, so kill him as fast as you can. He'll interact with the tornadoes, making them either fiery or frosty. If a tornado is fiery, it deals raid damage regardless of range, and if it's frosty, it will deal very, very heavy damage if it hits you. Remain in the alcove and keep fighting. This mechanic can be ignored and healed through. Finally, Iron Quan will throw out his spear and follow it up with a Fist Smash, dealing heavy raid damage over 7 seconds. This damage gets higher with Rising Anger, so the more times he actually casts this ability, the more trouble your raid will be in. Stack up under the boss and AoE heal to keep the raid alive. Once Iron Quan is dead, you have a short journey up to the second boss of the wing. There's only one trash pack in your way, Shanzei Celestial Shapers. These guys aggro as a pack of 4, and they have 2 abilities. Cosmic Strike, which creates a ball of energy that hits players and knocks them back for a short distance, and Lightning Lash, which is a chain lightning for raid damage. AoE these guys down, then proceed through the door to the left to the Twin Consorts. This is a 3-phase fight revolving around the 2 bosses, Lu Lin, Mistress of Solitude, and Suen, Mistress of Anger. Lu Lin represents the night, and Suen represents the day. They do not share health. As soon as you engage them, Suen will disappear and Phase 1, the night phase, will begin. Lu Lin will be attackable. She'll use Beast of Nightmares on the tank, which will create an ad called Beast of Nightmares, that only the tank can see. They have to kill it to stop an effect called Corrupted Healing from afflicting them. If the tank is healed while the Beast of Nightmares is alive, the healer doing so will be dotted, and this will stack fast. So tank swap every time Beast of Nightmares is used, and don't heal the tank until they kill their beast. And since the debuff tank is the only one that can see the beast, they have to kill it. Just note, healers, if the tank is on 4 health, heal him. Even if it will dot you, heal him. Lu Lin's other abilities in this phase are Moon Lotus and Cosmic Barrage. Moon Lotus creates a petal on the floor which will slowly send out floating green clouds. If anyone stands on the petal or the clouds, they'll be put to sleep for a short time. This can be very difficult to see, but these clouds have a very small hitbox, so keep your eyes open and just dance around them. Cosmic Barrage will create several balls of energy that launch themselves at raid members, knocking them back. These move so fast that you can't avoid them. Suen, the Daylight boss, will still be involved in this phase, but she only appears momentarily to cast abilities. These abilities do raid damage. One is Light of Day, which deals AoE damage to a random raid member. The other is Tears of the Sun, which is a channel for raid damage. Just heal through them both and stay spread out. After a couple of minutes, Lu Lin will disappear and Suen will take her place. Their roles reverse and the night becomes day. Suen will use Fan of Flames on the tank, dealing fire damage and increasing fire damage taken. Unlike Beast of Nightmares, this is a nice conventional tank swap. Swap on 3 stacks. She'll use Flames of Passion, jumping at a random raid member, knocking them back, then launching herself back to the tank and leaving a trail of fire behind. Fire is bad, don't stand in it. She'll also use Light of Day to continue doing AoE damage, so stay spread out. Finally, the most important ability she has is Blazing Radiance. This deals raid damage every 2 seconds and increases her fire damage by 2%. This stacks fast. Tanks, you can deal with this. Lu Lin is the answer. She will appear briefly to summon ice comets at people. These will knock back anyone they hit, and they are an attackable mob, however don't bother attacking them since they're harmless. They'll also leave a shadow behind them facing away from Suen, which will slow you if you stand in it. Tanks, if you move Suen over to one of these comets, her stacks of Blazing Radiance will start to decrease, and she will melt the comet. Keep her near one of these as much as you can, and the raid damage will stay nice and low. Finally, after a couple more minutes, Dusk will break, and both bosses will become active at once. You'll have to deal with both of their abilities at the same time. At this point you can Bloodlust, but the fight will end pretty soon. Nuke Suen as much as you can, it's generally good if she dies first. Once one of them dies, it will become either night or day. The next one should die fairly fast afterwards. This can be a bit hectic, so just hurry up and kill them. There's one detail of this fight that isn't really that important, but you may notice it. The August Celestials can help you. Each of them does something different. Chi-Ji the Red Crane will damage the bosses, Zuen the White Tiger will make the boss's abilities move super slow, making Cosmic Barrage from Lu Lin actually avoidable. Yulon the Jade Serpent will heal and restore mana to the raid, and Neozao the Black Ox will increase your maximum health. To get the Celestials to help you, go to one of their podiums in the corner and click on it. You'll get phased, and you'll have to draw a pattern in a group of stars. This is different for each Celestial. Follow the pattern that's shown above your head, studying how the stars move. Use your body as the ink for the painting. It's very confusing and not necessary at all for the fight, but it is quite fun and will help the raid in the fight in some kind of way. Once the twin consorts are dead, it's time for the obligatory horrific trash towards the last boss. There are 2 packs, each of 2. One will be a Thunderlord and the other a Lightning Guardian. You'll want 1 tank on each. Both have a conductive shield, which will temporarily cause them to do AoE damage around any player that damages them. This can result in huge spikes of damage if people are stacked, and you don't have that much room in the places you fight them, so try to find a corner to avoid being AoE'd too much. The Thunderlords also have Lei Shen's gift, which will make them attack faster, do chain lightning with each attack, but will slow their movement speed. You can kite them at this point, but it isn't required. The Lightning Guardian has conductive shield as well, but also has a lightning storm. This deals AoE damage in a 15-yard radius around the Lightning Guardian. Move out of it if you can. Once the first pack is dead, the corridor ahead will become available. It periodically explodes with lightning, but it doesn't hurt that much. You can duck into the side room to avoid it if you want. After the corridor, another small room with more trash. Repeat your process, spread out, avoid the conductive shield if you can, same as before, and then it's on to Lei Shen. Lei Shen is the final boss of this wing, and he's a complicated 3-phase fight with an intermission phase in between each of his primary phases. The first thing you'll need to know is about the room. It's split into 4 sections, each of which is very important. At the end of each quarter is a pylon that Lei Shen channels to. During the fight, he'll need to be moved from pylon to pylon. First, the tanks. In Phase 1, Lei Shen's tank swap ability is called Decapitate. This will place a debuff on his tank that after a few seconds will deal about 700,000 damage to you, decreasing the further away you are from Lei Shen. When you get this debuff, the other tank needs to swap with you and you need to leg it. Alternatively, you can just pop a whole bunch of cooldowns, but when you get hit by the Decapitate, you will take increased physical damage for 30 seconds, so you'll want to tank swap anyway. Another important thing for the tanks to note, Lei Shen is a power source. He constantly exudes lightning, and this needs to be contained or it will kill your raid. Gameplay-wise, Lei Shen will use Discharge if he's not near a pylon. This deals increasing raid damage, and you need to move him to a pylon fast before this damage ends up killing everyone. Now, each of these pylons has a power level, going from 0 to 100. While Lei Shen is within about 30 yards of a pylon, the power level will increase, and the pylon will grant Lei Shen an ability. If the power level of the pylon reaches 100, it will level up, and the ability it grants Lei Shen will get stronger and nastier. When this happens, the pylon's power level resets to 0, and it will start to climb again. After a pylon has leveled up twice, it will be fully powered, and Lei Shen's power will start to discharge, meaning you buggered up. A pylon should never level up ever, and it should never get to full power like this. Additionally, every time there's a phase transition, so twice throughout the fight, Lei Shen will overcharge the pylon that has the highest power level, making it useless but also covering that part of the room with lightning for the rest of the fight. For this reason, you are in control of what parts of the room are covered in lightning. Here's what you should generally do. Start with any of the 4 pylons, watch the power bar that comes with the fight, and then move Lei Shen from one pylon to another at about 70 or 80 pylon power. Never move Lei Shen diagonally across the room unless you have to in order to avoid a quarter that's covered in lightning. Okay, with that out of the way, let's talk about Lei Shen's intrinsic abilities in Phase 1. He has these regardless of which pylon he's at. Other than the tank Decapitate, he'll use Lightning Crash and Thunderstruck. Lightning Crash deals damage in melee range and leaves small pools of lightning on the ground. Melee stay out of the pools, and tanks move the boss just a little bit to help give the melee some room. Thunderstruck is an ability Lei Shen will cast at a ranged raid member. He'll create a small targeting circle and throw his axe at it. If you're standing in the circle when the axe hits, you die. No take-backsies, you're dead. Thunderstruck also deals heavy raid damage, decreasing the further away from the targeting zone you are. So if you see the zone, move away from it to reduce the damage you take. And never ever stand in the center of it. Now, let's talk pylons. Each pylon has an ability it grants Lei Shen while he's connected to it. These are all important abilities, and you need to know what they do. You don't generally have to worry about which pylons allow for each ability, but I'll use compass references just in case you want to know. The North pylon grants Static Shock. This targets a raid member and creates a circle around them. After 8 seconds, the target and anyone in the circle split a high amount of nature damage. If you see a static shock on someone, hug them to help reduce the damage. The East pylon grants Diffusion Chain. This is a chain lightning that, for each target it hits, will spawn an ad called Diffused Lightning. Generally, you'll want to be spread for Phase 1, so make sure you're doubly so when dealing with this ability. Kill the ad as soon as possible. The South pylon grants Overcharge. This targets a random player, roots them, and makes them massive. After 3 seconds, they'll explode and create a ring of lightning that expands to about 60 yards before despawning. If you get hit by this ring as it expands, you get stunned. However, there is a safe zone directly underneath the overcharged player. If you see someone really big, run underneath them to avoid being stunned. Finally, the West pylon grants Bouncing Bolt. This will create several swirly zones on the ground, which a bolt of lightning will land on shortly afterwards, dealing moderate nature damage. But if these bolts don't hit anyone, they'll spawn a very nasty ad called Unharnessed Power. So if you see a swirly zone, stand in it to avoid ads from spawning. If one spawns, kill it as soon as possible. Those are the pylons. We've gone over them and Lei Shen's phase 1 abilities. To quickly recap, tanks move Lei Shen from pylon to pylon at about 70 to 80 energy, run away when he uses Decapitate and then tank swap. Melee don't stand in lightning crash pools. Everyone don't stand in the Thunderstruck target. Everyone has to worry about the pylon abilities. Stack on the afflicted player for static shock and overcharge, stand in the bouncing bolt swirls, and remain spread out for diffusion chain. The other abilities have a couple of seconds before you need to be in a place to stop them, so generally stay spread out until an ability comes in. Once Lei Shen reaches 65% health, he'll go into an intermission phase. He'll teleport to the center of the room, become untargetable, and activate every single pylon at once, making the raid have to deal with all of the abilities at the same time. However, the raid will need to spread out around the 4 corners of the room during this intermission phase in order to catch all of the abilities. You can assign groups if you're organized, but generally just spreading out and making sure everyone can be healed is a good idea. You'll deal with all 4 pylon abilities now, with 2 abilities coming in at once. This isn't too nasty, but make sure you don't accidentally run out of the group with a static shock or miss a bouncing bolt spawning behind you. After a minute or so, the intermission phase ends and Lei Shen will go into phase 2. The pylon with the highest power level will become inactive and coat that part of the room with lightning. Don't stand in it. Now, as in phase 1, Lei Shen will charge any pylon he's near, and discharge if he's not near one. Tanks continue the movement as before, at 70 to 80 power per pylon. The only difference is one of them is now completely unusable, and it may be possible that you'll have to return to one of the pylons before the next intermission phase. If you do, the raid will just have to handle it. Lei Shen's tank swap in phase 2 is Fusion Slash. This will deal high damage and knock you back by about 10 yards. Don't stand on the very edge of the platform or you'll get knocked off and die, which sucks and makes you look like a plonker. The Fusion Slash will also double the damage you take from it. Tank swap on 1 stack. Now, for the rest of the raid, you'll have to deal with the pylon's abilities again, save for the one that's inactive, and Lei Shen has completely different abilities now. He won't use phase 1 abilities in this phase. His first new ability is Lightning Whip. He'll face the raid, channel a massive whip of lightning, and then slam it into the floor. This has a very long range and will deal high damage if you're caught in it. It also leaves lightning on the ground afterwards. When this comes in, everyone, the ranged and healers included, need to duck behind Lei Shen. As a note, the lightning on the ground from this whip can be jumped over safely. His next new ability is Ball Lightning. This summons a small ad under several players' feet. The act of the ad appearing does small AoE damage, and then afterwards they will all jump, at the same time, to random raid members. You have to AoE these guys down, but they can't be tanked, so once they spawn, the ranged and healers should stack up with the melee. Then, AoE the balls down, then spread out again. Repeat. So those, on top of the pylon abilities, are what you have to worry about in phase 2. Ranged, spread until ball lightning, then go into melee and AoE. When the balls are dead, spread out again. Everyone avoid the lightning whip. At 35% health, Lei Shen will intermission again. This is just like the first intermission, but with one of the pylons not active. Spread out, but don't stand in the corner of the room covered in lightning. This is terrible, and you should feel bad if you stand there. Don't. Stand in the bouncing bolts, spread for diffusion chain, stack up for static shock, and overcharge. Once the intermission ends, it's time for phase 3. Another pylon will break and cover that part of the room in lightning too. Tanks, if you're really smart, you can keep one pylon really high, I mean like 90 to 95 high, so that the room isn't cut in two diagonally. This isn't necessary, but the more room you have, the better. Once phase 3 begins, Bloodlust. It's now a DPS race. All of the pylon abilities are gone, huzzah! Lei Shen will no longer discharge either, double huzzah! He gets his phase 1 and phase 2 abilities. Not so grand. And he even gets new abilities on top of that. So phase 3 is a complete nightmare. You're going to be hit by an ability at all times. There's practically zero downtime here. Let's talk about his new abilities first. The first is for the tanks, and it's called Overwhelming Power. This is a dot that makes you chain lightning whenever you get meleeed. Swap at about 10 stacks. You'll do raid damage while you have this, so make sure you tank swap at the right time. The next is Violent Gale Winds. Lei Shen will open a wall at one of the 4 sides of the room, north, east, south, or west, and the raid will take damage from the winds that flow forth from it. This will steadily increase throughout the fight, and the winds will slowly push you in a direction. The damage from this will steadily increase throughout the fight, and the winds will slowly push you in a direction. This can push you off the platform to a horrible death, so keep an eye on where you're being pushed and don't get pushed into bad stuff. Speaking of bad stuff, Lei Shen will now use Thunderstruck, Ball Lightning, and Lightning Whip, so you'll need to dance. Move away from the Thunderstruck location, stay spread for Ball Lightning, then move in and AoE while simultaneously avoiding the Lightning Whip. You'll be moving a whole bunch. It's horrible and there's loads of raid damage, and kill him fast to make this phase go as quickly as you can. So that's the fight. It's long and complicated and really quite fun. Learn the abilities, learn where to stand, what to stand in and what not to stand in, and if your group struggles, try organising groups for each corner of the room for intermission phases. Healers, this fight is very bursty, and if someone gets hit by an ability, they'll get chunked low or just killed, so prepare yourself for big heals. Once Lei Shen is dead, you've completed the wing. Congratulations on your success. That's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it and found it helpful. If you have any thoughts, make sure to leave a comment below and like or dislike the video. I'm always after feedback, so let me know what you think. You can contact me using the links in the description, or just leave a comment. Make sure you subscribe to catch my videos as soon as they come out. Thank you very much for watching, and I wish you the best of luck with your loot in the Throne of Thunder. Places you fight them, so try to find a corner to avoid being AoE'd too much. The Thunder Lords also the